right, Jourik, great to see you. Great to see everyone here. Why don't we go ahead and get started? So everyone, welcome to our second episode of the Smartling Masterclass Series. Teams are under more pressure than ever to scale faster across more content and markets with fewer resources while still keeping quality, brand, and customer experience intact. AI promises to help, but many teams are unsure how to use it responsibly and where humans should remain in the loop to maintain quality. In this episode of the Masterclass Series, Lessons from the Best Localization Leaders, Jourik Ciesielski, CTO at ELAN Languages, a leading LSP and interpreting company, joins me to share real-life lessons from designing and scaling AI-embedded localization workflows in real production environments. Jourik, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me, first of all. Really appreciate it. Yes, so who am I? Jourik Ciesielski. I have 15 years already of experience in the language industry, working on language technology. I was there building MT systems when it was still rule-based and statistical, great times. Started my company at Yamagata Europe, entered as an intern, left as their CTO. And then in 2020, I started my entrepreneurial journey, founded my own company, joined Nimdzi Insights for market research initiatives, good stuff. And then last year in 2025, my company was acquired by ELAN Languages. They offered me the position of CTO, which I happily accepted, and that's where I am today.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah, I think you're one of the folks we've been really excited to have on the show here. I think you've got a really well-rounded experience and a great technical grounding and understanding in the real world. So you also have some hot takes here. So you said that a lot of people don't really judge AI's true potential and true pitfalls. What do you mean by that? And where are teams getting it wrong when they think about AI and localization?
True. That's something I've been saying for quite a while now. And, let me break down this opinion for you and draw the landscape the way I see it. So I think currently in the language industry, you have a debate, a battle, if you like, between AI optimists on the one hand, the kind of people that say, oh, AI is a magic solution to everything, and it will solve all of our problems, and translation will be better, faster, and cheaper, and it will take over my entire operation without any kind of complexity. That's one side of the spectrum. On the other side, we have the naysayers, the kind of people that say AI is stupid and the only thing it does is it reproduces patterns it has seen, and it's a total disgrace if we use it for translation operations and this and that, which is, not exactly the case either. So my opinion is that this debate is completely unnecessary, it's irrelevant, and it really prevents us from exploring the full potential of AI. So if you ask me where the truth is, I would say it's somewhere in between, right between those two very conflicting opinions. I would say that the true power of AI, of the technology, is insane. I think a lot of don't even realize how powerful this technology is. But, and this is important, the road towards efficient, responsible, and cost-effective AI implementations is a long one. It's really not a matter of plugging in a model, adding an API key, and then expecting it to produce miracles. So this is the one thing I really want to emphasize. The recipe for success, in my opinion, is on the one hand, deep customization. You really want those models to know you as a company and to speak your corporate language. Number two, the ability to use it for multiple tasks, not just machine translation. Let's not narrow AI down to machine translation. And number three, the ability to leverage it across multiple systems, because we all know in the enterprise reality, there are multiple systems being deployed, and the true power lies in cross-leveraging the systems or the models across the systems. Sounds easier than it is, of course. It's something that does not happen overnight, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think one of the things that we see with our customers, and when we get out and talk with them, is they're under a tremendous amount of pressure from the C-suite, who views AI as being magic, right? And that's been their experience with it to a certain degree. And so why shouldn't companies just do what their CFO really wants them to do, which is just use GPT to translate everything?
I can give you plenty of reasons. First of all, and I think the most important one is the lack of customization. Of course, you can throw content in ChatGPT and have it translated, and yes, it will be okay, but you will miss out on the opportunity to implement like those very advanced customization techniques, which make your AI solution stand out. So that's point number one. Number two would be probably the lack of automation. So you cannot just throw every document into ChatGPT. There needs to be some content parsing. For example, you cannot integrate it into whatever system, and in the end, you might end up copying and pasting, which is something I'm basically allergic to. So lack of automation is something else. And I could go on like this forever, lack of insights into quality, accountability, risk mitigation. Imagine that something goes wrong. And I can tell you that if you throw your entire content stack into ChatGPT, eventually it will go wrong. And then who's accountable? Very important question. Maybe something else. If you throw all of your content in ChatGPT, your CFO might be happy, but your IT manager will probably not be too excited about this idea.
Yeah.
And then maybe something else. Yeah, please do, Bryan.
Yeah, and your CMO. I think it's interesting when we see this. Our perspective, or what we've observed, is that kind of like standalone LLMs are getting better every month. They're still around the quality of neural machine translation. Before they were not, but they are getting better. But the whole point of even then, I think everyone on this call understands what is a good use case for neural machine translation and what's not. And I think we see that a lot. Like, people are just like, hey, let's just use GPT it. And the reality of the matter is that you're going to run into a couple of problems. One is you're going to run into that quality problem, that personalization issue that we know about. It's especially if it's untrained. And then you run into the same problem that you run into with just using Google Translate or something like that. It's really the work, the expense in translation is not so much in the translation itself. It's actually in the workflows, right? So unless it's integrated across your tech stack, and you're dealing with cutting and pasting and sending around spreadsheets or uploading and downloading documents, that's where the time and expense really builds up. So automation here is really essential.
100%, absolutely.
Yeah. When you think about one of the hardest questions that teams face is, where and when do we need humans in the loop, and where can we fully automate? You said it's not people versus machine, it's a combination. Walk us through how you think about that.
Yeah, so I think my simple answer to this question would be, whenever you're dealing with business critical content, you need humans in the loop somehow. And it doesn't matter why the content is business critical, because your customer satisfaction might drop, or because the mistake might have legal repercussions or whatever. And it also doesn't matter how big or small the contribution of the human stakeholder is, or when exactly it takes place. My simple answer is, whenever dealing with business critical content, you might need to have a human in the loop somewhere. Now, honestly, I don't think that this is even a question that we should ask. Where can we fully rely on the machine, and when do we need humans? I think we're dealing with a deeper problem here. And I think the question that we should ask is like, how ready are our processes for genuine AI-driven or AI-assisted localization? And I gotta warn you, there's a bit of a monologue coming up here, but this is a very important important theme I want to bring up. So when I look at the reality of the modern enterprise today, I see lots of exciting but challenging and complex things. High velocity content. We need to ship content at the speed of light. Multimodality. We're not just processing documents anymore. We're also processing loose text strings and images and speech and video. And there's also a myriad of content systems that need to be managed somehow, GitHub, Jira, Figma, and everything fits within the same workflows. Now, I know that many companies are doing a lot of great things. I know for a fact that Smartling is doing a lot of great things. But when I approach this question from a language industry perspective, I still see a lot of, and you just mentioned this as well, Bryan, I still see a lot of, processes that are very clunky and cumbersome and rely on documents and emails and manual triggers. That's what I'm seeing. So the days where you were a language service provider and you could wait for a 50,000 word manual to come in for translation, those days are over. Nevertheless, we are still applying those exact same processes, and that is exactly what, according to me, entices enterprises to play around with AI themselves, run translations themselves, and then give them to the provider and just ask them to review them, and obviously lower the rate because, hey, we did the AI for you. So I think this is the real question. Are our processes ready for genuine AI-assisted localization? My answer would be no.
Yeah, we tend to see that. That's probably, once again, that's really one of the most expensive places. And as we think about translation localization for global enterprises, I do believe that, and we've seen this, is that creating localized content is a strategic advantage. In nearly every case that we've seen it, pre-post, A/B testing, when you're moving into a new market, it drives conversion rate on the website, it drives engagement rate, it drives revenue. And you can think about that. You've heard me talk a little bit about, sort of like the ultimate personalization. Companies spend a tremendous amount of time and energy around creating personalized marketing content. And then if you don't deliver that in the target language, you've just kind of like completely blown all that effort up. And people can tell when it's well translated or not. You can tell when you land on a page and it doesn't look quite right. So to me, this is one of the really critical elements of translation. And I think one of the things that we're trying to solve, and I think you would agree with this too, is that if it's a competitive advantage, how do we maximize the scale of that translation? And I think there's three things that go into that. One is automation, right? So automating the process, getting that email spreadsheet sort of manual process out of that loop. That's super important. Number two is creating trained engines, right? So engines that are trained on your brand, your terminology, your tone of voice, and then developing workflows that help you assess, I should say workflows that include quality assurance, right? So does this content, is this fit to publish, or do I need to have a human verifying it? And a lot of it depends on the content type. And so having a system that allows you to set up those workflows so that you can create those dynamic environments are really one of the most important things I think that can be done to scale translation. Have you had any experiences where a team has tried to fully automate something that shouldn't be?
Yes, absolutely. When you're approaching something blindly and you just want to automate something for the sake of automating it, then things will go wrong. It's always a matter of, I think when you want to automate something, you always need to start from a problem scenario. Why do I want to automate this specific process or this specific workflow? Because the manual way of doing this doesn't work. And if you manage to really determine something that isn't going very well within your organization, then you can start thinking about automating it and perhaps applying AI somewhere in the process. So I think that's the main cause or the real origin of bad automations. People are doing it for the sake of automating it, but don't really understand why they're automating it, and they don't really understand the manual process underneath it. And I think that's a guarantee for failure. And yes, I've seen that in many occasions, to be honest. Absolutely.
Where I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but where in the organization should that be happening? Who's struggling, and how can you help solve that problem?
That is a very good question. And I think like the starting point is probably, move away from, silos, departments that are actually islands and doing things on their own, and just, creating their own workflows and, throwing their own stuff into ChatGPT, but without really knowing what the other departments are doing. I think you can learn a lot from, what your peers and your colleagues and your stakeholders are doing. And I think that's also probably a very good source of inspiration to embark on something that is more automated, more AI driven. And I think this interconnection between different departments within your organization, between different stakeholders, is also a very important step towards more centralized localization, which is in the end, the ultimate goal of the modern enterprise, I would say.
Yeah, I hear this all the time. I hear this a lot. I think this is a super interesting discussion because, like, what ends up happening, I think, in the real world is you have a localization department, and if you're too slow, okay, if you're too expensive, if you're kind of using the old way, then what ends up happening is departments will kind of go off on their own, right? They just say, you know what, I can't wait for a 14-day turnaround. I can't wait for a 10-day turnaround or a 5-day turnaround, and it's too much money. I need to get this stuff done. And I think they go off on their own. I think they go off piste, right? And they start translating things on their own. You end up getting this breakdown within the organization. And that to me feels like a common refrain. So I think this is really kind of an important inflection point in our industry, right? As localization leaders within enterprises, is making sure that we're addressing that issue, right? Because people will find a way to get stuff done faster, cheaper. And that kind of like creates a little bit of a decelerant or a problem within the organization, in my opinion, across a lot of different dimensions. I don't know if you have experience seeing this or any other thoughts on that.
Well, I have seen it, but I must add to this that, I have mainly experience from the LSP side. So I've always been on the provider side, not so much on the buyer side, even though I've operated as a consultant. But the thing that I've really seen is basically what we're now just describing. We have all these departments: marketing, product, legal, HR, you name it, and unavoidably they start doing stuff on their own, and that's where things go wrong. And it's really or it should be the ambition to centralize as much as possible, cross leverage resources, linguistic resources, strategies, and so on and so forth. So have I seen it? Yes. Have I been like deeply involved in it? Not really, because I've mainly been on the provider side.
Yeah, we see this a lot, in our world. And so one of the things that we're working hard to do is to make sure that we create a solution that scales across the organization and is easy for the stakeholders to use, right? You got to kind of draw them in, and then you can work your way up from that. But in our experience, creating a fast, easy to use, effective solution helps draw other organizations or departments into your localization efforts. And I think that's really key. When we think a little bit about quality, right? So I think one of the big pressure points is that I'm getting a lot of pressure as a localization leader or a marketing leader or any other of the functions to use AI, right? But also to use it in a way that ensures quality, right? Because we in the industry, what do we get yelled at for? We get yelled at for poor quality. We get yelled at for mistakes. The French country manager, the Japanese country manager calls us and says, "Hey, this is wrong," or "I wouldn't do it this way," et cetera, right? So how do we, what I'm hearing out there is traditional QA and LQA processes don't scale when you're dealing with AI-generated content and higher volumes. How are you seeing teams modernize their quality processes?
Yeah. So first of all, true, absolutely true. And again, I think we have a little bit of a problem here, according to me. Like the current algorithms that we have for QA, quality assurance, and LQA are completely obsolete, according to me. So let's maybe start with QA. People who do QA, I'm convinced that many people in the room today are doing, QA checks. First of all, it generates an outrageous amount of false positives and false negatives. There's no context awareness, and it's super hard to customize that. And that is like the thing that we do not need in the current AI climate. Then we have something else, LQA. I think the problem there is a little bit less severe. The one problem, and I'm sorry, this sounds a little bit controversial, but the one problem with LQA is that it's purely driven by humans, which means it's subject to human bias. I've been endless times in situations where a translator and a reviewer fail to agree what a final translation should look like, even though they're working on the same project, same document, same references, they have the same skills, background, and so on and so forth, which is why I always refer to quality as our industry's Pandora's box. It's so personal, it's so subjective. Therefore, I think in the current AI climate, what we should do is approach quality not as linguistic perfection, not getting every dot and every comma right. I think we should really measure it in terms of impact. What is the impact? What is the performance of the content? What is the intent? And do we meet the goals? Yes or no? And I always give the same example. Here's maybe not the most realistic example, but I think it's a good one. If you have a website, and that 30% of your website is high traffic or is generating high traffic content, then that 30% deserves to be, a piece of art, ideally delivered by a human translator, period. However, if the remaining 70% allows you to attract more visitors to your website, keep them engaged a little bit longer, and maybe get your multilingual SEO right, and you do that via quick and dirty machine translation, quick and dirty between emphasis, that's actually the exact same level of quality, not from a linguistic perspective, absolutely not, but from a business perspective, that is the exact same level of quality, according to me. And I think this is also what managers like to hear. So I think that's a new way of setting KPIs, metrics, and measuring quality. I could add to this that, I'm using LLMs, large language models myself as well, on a pretty high scale for QA, and I absolutely love it. I think large language models are really, really good when it comes to evaluating the quality of a translation in accordance with provided instructions, references, terminology, and so on and so forth. And I do want to add one more thing to this. If you manage to check the quality of a translation with AI after the process, you can also check it during the process, which brings me to the concept of quality estimation, which is very, very important in the process of distinguishing business critical from second tier content.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's really interesting. One of the other conversations, we've been going out and we do these road shows. We go through, we'll swing through several cities in Europe, and then we'll do the same thing. We're actually heading to the East Coast here next week. We're going to be in Atlanta, DC, New York, and Boston, and we'll meet with 100 or so companies on this trip. And the really interesting thing that we see often is that in our heads, in our localization heads, we're very focused on our operational metrics, which are quality, cost, and speed, automation, right? Those are operational metrics for us. The business has different metrics, which are usually typically oriented around, revenue growth, by country growth, conversion rate, engagement rates, ticket count, et cetera, those sort of things. And I always encourage our customers in the localization departments and even the marketing departments, when they're thinking about translation, try and reframe your operational metrics into your enterprise's strategic metrics or KPIs. it'll give you a lot more leverage within your organization, and will also help you think a little bit more about what's really important. So I'll give you an example. You take quality. What is quality, right? So to your point, we see a huge spectrum across the board, depending on content type or not depending on content type, and we get all wrapped around the axles around, well, the Italian country manager says, well, I wouldn't have said it that way. Okay, but is that really relevant, right? In the case of things. So I think that's why picking or focusing in on a company's KPI is really important. Let's take conversion rate, for example. Okay, how's your, did it affect conversion rate, this translation? Did these translations, are they affecting ticket count? Are we getting customer complaints about them? Yes or no? And so this is a concept of fit for purpose translation, which creates a different framework to view quality, in my opinion. It kind of takes away some of that noise. Now, that being said, we have a function called LQA agent, right? So which is what it sounds like. It's basically an agentic version of LQA, and it reviews translations with AI and then spits out a score, right? That's helpful in a lot of different ways. That's helpful, to sort of have a stamp of approval for this content that says, yes, it's fit for purpose. It's going to get the job done with the right amount of content. You can dial that, right, depending on, okay, is this user-generated content, so not that important, all the way to this is a landing page, this is a homepage. It's like, it's got to be perfect, right? And so using a tool like that helps you then dial in the rest of your system. But I do think that there's an important conversation to have here in the age of AI, and as enterprises are looking at costs and budgets and implementation of AI, is making sure that we, as a whole in the industry, have this view or this lens on what are my company's KPIs, and how am I laddering up into that success, right? Rather than, or I don't know if I say rather than, but in conjunction with having my operational metrics. I just think that's super important.
100%. And I know there's a little bit of emotion attached to that, because certain stakeholders in the process will not be too excited about the fact that we're not seeking linguistic perfection anymore, and that makes sense, because you're basically touching the pride and the territory of the linguist, and that makes total sense. But this is, the new reality of the modern enterprise. And I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, I see that too. It's really interesting. I see the same thing happening in engineering, right? So, if you're a software engineer, you take great pride in your work, right? No one's a better coder than you are, right? And the idea of using AI to help you code or do the coding is like angsty, right? But it's proving to be like this massive unlock for engineers that understand how to use it effectively, and makes them 10x more productive and creative. Yeah. And I think that's really where I think about, or we're thinking about, when I think about the linguists. We have thousands of translators, linguists operating inside of a platform from hundreds of LSPs, right, that use the Smartling platform for their customer. And one of the things that we're trying to do is, maybe in the way that engineers are evolving, right, to use AI to help them be more productive, be more creative, right, to use their higher brain functions. Same thing on the linguist side with the LSPs that use the platform, and then with the translators that use the platform, like kind of taking away that rote work and helping them be a little bit more, once again, productive and creative. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, the use of AI to help them do that.
Well, I think deep down linguists know that AI can really help them in their daily operations and make them a lot more effective, and just make their life a lot easier. I think deep down they know that. A lot of linguists know that. But again, there's this component of pride and emotion attached to it. And again, I totally understand that. But just the other day, I stumbled upon an interesting theory. The Jevons paradox. I think a lot of people will have heard of it, but the Jevons paradox basically says that if AI and technology allow us to translate more efficiently, the demand for translation services will only increase. It will only go up. And I really choose to believe that theory. So I think there's this entire universe of content waiting out there for us to be translated. And I think we will need AI and automation and linguists to make that happen. And I think we can really redesign, those broken processes I was just mentioning, and come up with like a new reality for professional language services.
Yeah, I agree. You still my line. I love if you've listened to me. I love talking about Jevons paradox.
Jevons paradox.
This nerdy 19th century economist who was the thought was that coal would destroy the increased production control would destroy everything. But we've seen that so many times get played out. Most recently in cloud services, right? You look at, everyone thought that would be the end of that, but it's proven to be this massive accelerator. And I see that within localization too. And you touched on a great point here, which is that I've never met a company that doesn't ration translation, right? It's expensive and it's slow. And so as a consequence, you sort of ration this thing. And I think that this is a moment for localization managers to really have a transformative effect on their enterprises. I would look at it a different way. I would look at it as to say, instead of me rationing this amount of content, I'm only going to translate this much because it's too slow, too expensive, too burdensome, to transition to a mode where I'm going to translate everything. I've got that ability now to create this massive competitive advantage and translate everything. I don't know what percentage companies translate, maybe 10%, 5%, and the amount of content is doubling every year, right? So totally. This is the only way for us to keep up. And I also think that that companies that get this, right, people that get this and create this unlock, right, are going to create significant competitive advantage for themselves.
This is where you stole my line. I was going to say the same thing. Like, companies who really understand this way of working, they will lead, this reset of the industry and our processes. The companies that accelerate that, they will really have a very important competitive advantage in this space. Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
it was funny. I just had this conversation, kind of going back to this engineering example. I think it's top of mind for me, and it's also, one of the areas that AI is disrupting so much. But we have hundreds of engineers that work on our products every day, and I had this conversation with them last Friday. We do this, this all hands, and I said, listen, guys, I don't want to reduce headcount in engineering, but I need you guys to be like 10x faster. 10x more productive, because that's the opportunity. That's what's happening here. So imagine a company that has the most skilled engineers in the world building whatever product it is, right? And you have the opportunity to make them 10x more productive, right? And now they're creating at a pace that's 10 times faster, 10 times more, right? That to me is the Jevons paradox of this conversation. I'm not interested in using AI to reduce my headcount. I'm not interested in reducing the number of engineers that I've got. I just want them 10x more productive. Same thing with translators and linguists. We've hired hundreds of translators and linguists over the last 12, 18 months because our AI translation business is growing so rapidly. It grew over 200% last year, right? Which probably makes us one of the fastest growing translation companies in the world. And as a result, this is the perfect example of Jevons paradox. We're actually hiring more translators and linguists. So
absolutely.
I think and our cost per word and our time per word have come down dramatically. That's literally Jevons paradox, right? As we drive down the complexity of translation, as we drive down the cost and time of that word, we're actually translating significantly more words for our customers. Our customers have tripled the amount of content that they translate in the last 12 to 18 months. For significantly less dollars and less cost. So that to me is where this is really going.
Yeah, we have similar cases where we have very, very good results. There's one case where we ditched the legacy technology, neural machine translation, and went all in on, LLM translation, deep customization, style guides, instructions, terminology, this and that. We measured a productivity increase of 43% in terms of post-edited words per hour. And I think that's massive. I was super happy with that result. And our client, they got it. They weren't like, great, but when are you going to ditch the human linguist? When are you going to automate the full thing? They were happy with it. They were like, okay, this is what it's all about, because we have this myriad of content out there that needs to be translated. And now you can produce X amount of words more on an average per hour. So that's the kind of client that really gets it. And I think that's the way of moving forward, with the whole AI implementation in the industry.
Agreed. And so, kind of continuing with that theme here a little bit, one of the biggest productivity killers is fragmented workflows, copying and pasting between systems, manual handoffs. How do you approach integrating AI directly into workflows instead of bolting it on?
Yeah, this is basically where our entire discussion comes together, right? I think if you're serious about implementing AI, what you're ultimately looking for is this dynamic, agnostic layer of intelligence that you can use for multiple use cases across systems and across content streams. Now, I think we have another little bit of a legacy problem here, and the problem is that our industry has never been very good at connectivity. We used to have the CAT tool, which has always been the beating heart of language operations. And that's exactly where we always try to bolt on new technologies, neural machine translations, content connectors, and also the first bit of AI sprinkling was done in the CAT tool. But the CAT tool has always been like the starting point as well as the end point of the process. And I don't think that's right. Now, today, we have so many resources and technologies and APIs and models out there that we can really do things differently. And the fact of the matter is that I'm seeing, colleagues and peers building like the most insane workflows themselves, like non-technical profiles, but they're doing that themselves in workflow builders like, make.com or N8N, and they integrate ERP systems and communication channels and translation APIs and language models and this and that. The thing is that the TMS is still out there, but it's not the exclusive starting point and end point of the process anymore. It's still there at the core of the language operation, holding the different language resources and streamlining the actual linguistic work. But it's one component in a very complex process. And I think that's the ultimate goal. So I think my piece of advice here would be like, people, if you're serious about AI implementations and automations, don't think in terms of, point-to-point processes, translation, QA. Think in terms of end-to-end processes. Where do we start when we create content, and where do we end when we publish the content? And that's exactly the process you need to monitor. You need to augment with AI. So that would be my piece of advice here.
Yeah, no, those are great. Those are great observations. Let's kind of move into like actionable, some actions we can take here, what we can do together to be successful. If someone listening today wants to make immediate impact or progress, what's one or several things they can do this week to get started?
Yeah, first of all, get those expectations right. AI is powerful, super powerful, but it's not going to take over your entire operation by doing this. That's not going to happen. So that's very important. Set those expectations properly. Number two, and you've probably heard this like all the time, if AI or a language model is the engine, then data is the fuel. So do a very thorough inventory of the data that you have, within your organization, and think about hygiene. Data is one thing, clean data is something else. So start with a very good inventory of your data. If you want to implement AI to improve the quality of your machine translation, but you don't know how to define quality, or you have no data to support that mission, then you're not exactly off to a very good start. Repeating the same thing from the previous question, think in terms of end-to-end processes, not in terms of point-to-point processes. And the one piece of advice I always give people is like, when you take your first baby steps in the whole implementation of AI, and you need to measure how well it is performing, you need to measure one thing. Is the model doing what I want it to do? If you want it to translate with terminology and it does that, but you're still not entirely happy about the quality of the output, then that's not necessarily an AI problem. That might be a prompt problem, that might be a data problem, that might be something else. So measure your first results in terms of, is the model doing what I expect it to do? Yes, go on. No, then there might be some homework for you to do. Limit the scope of your proof of concept, one content stream, one language combination, and build it up from there. So those would be like my checklist for getting started with AI this week.
Yeah, I love that. I think, setting up, there's nothing to do it but to do it, setting up a pilot, setting expectations within your organization that this is what you're doing, I think are super powerful things to do. And I would also, listen, as a member of the C-suite, as a CEO here, just like my advice to folks that are listening into this conversation, every CEO out there is under intense pressure from their board, from their investors, to not only implement AI across their organization, but to begin to show results. So for you to come forward, as a member of your team and say, hey, this is what we're doing to begin to implement AI within our organization to have an impact, is a really, really powerful thing for you to do. For your team and for your career. I'm looking for it every day inside my organization. I've got people that are coming to me and showing me the incredible work that they're doing. And I got to tell you, like, you get noticed. Okay. So if you want to get on the radar screen in a good way, come forward with an AI initiative and demonstrating results. So that's like my one bit of CEO advice to you. And I love, and in fact, this is one of our questions here, I think, and we see this all the time, because when you move to AI, the training data becomes paramount, becomes really important, especially as you start driving more volume through it, and there's less human touch on each of those words. So translation memory, glossary, style guide, terminology database, if those are if those closets haven't been cleaned out in a while, you're going to not get great results. So I highly advise you, and we do a lot of this work for our customers as they embark on this process, is to do a check on those linguistic assets and to fix and improve those linguistic assets ahead of launching on this. You're going to get much, much better results. I'm sure you've probably seen similar.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So one of the questions here is the customizing. I'll ask. We'll move into Q&A here because I think this has been a great session so far. But we've got some good questions from the audience here. A question coming in from Alejandra: to customize and train AI modules, we need quality linguistic assets like style guides and term bases. How can these assets be optimized for AI use, prompt injection, etc.?
That's a very good question. I think there's, some kind of roadmap if you want to customize a large language model. There are many potential customization techniques out there, and I think the most important one is the prompt, and the nice thing about prompting a model is that you can really turn the model into your assistant. You can tell the model what you're translating. If you tell the model that you're translating a product description on Amazon Marketplace, the model will know what that is and what is important when doing that. You can tell the model who you're translating for, target audience of 15-year-old children, whatever. So you can really inform the model with all kinds of very important instructions and pieces of information, which will already increase the quality of the output. Number 2, instructions, style guides. Totally. Write a compact style guide in a very straightforward do and don't manner. Do this, never do that, and give examples. That's very, very, very important. Term bases, LLMs, in my opinion, are extremely good at managing terminology, injecting it in machine translations, evaluating it, and so on and so forth. So that's already a very good start if you want to customize a model. There are more advanced customization techniques like genuinely fine-tuning a model on your translation memory. I would not do that as the first step. I would do that whenever you find out that it's really necessary to do that. But you see, there's some kind of roadmap, prompt, style guide, terms, and then you have more advanced things which you can definitely try out if necessary.
That's great. That's great. Super helpful. Thank you. I've got another question here from Ahmed, LQA specialist. I have a question. In your model, what is your acceptable quality threshold before content is published without human review? And overall, is publishing AI content without a human review generally accepted for the time being?
Good question. What quality means for you as an organization, and what good enough means for you, I cannot really answer that question. That really depends on so many parameters within your organization. So that's actually a question that you should ask and yourself and try to solve yourself. I really, as I said in the discussion, whenever you feel like there's a little risk of something going wrong, a little mistake can have very huge consequences. And whenever you have this risk of something going wrong and having serious repercussions, that's where you know that you need some kind of human in the loop. So I would try to assess the risk level. If it's high, you definitely need a human in the loop. If it's low, then yeah, I'm confident that in some cases, in some scenarios, pure LLM AI-driven translations can be good enough, to use a controversial term.
Yeah. One more question on quality, and then we'll wrap up here. I thought a lot of good questions on quality here. You can tell where people's heads are at, I think. Are there any, this is from Monica, are there any new threshold standards for AI generated translations, or is every LSP creating their own based on their client's content type, etc.?
Well, I don't think there are any new thresholds. We have quite some, legacy thresholds, comets and LQA scores and this and that. I never really believed in them because I think they are more useful for evaluating your training process of your models than evaluating the actual quality of the output that it produces. So this is a good question. I would say no, we do not have any new threshold standards, but this might be a perfect opportunity for me to say that we probably need new threshold standards to measure that somehow. So that's a very good question. Thank you, Monica.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. Well, we're coming up on the end of time here, and Jourik, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and we at Smartling hope you all enjoyed this discussion. We love the opportunity to talk with industry experts like Jourik, who have a broad set of experiences across the industry. And if you want to go deeper on AI quality and scaling localization strategically, please join us at our upcoming Global Ready Conference. It's our annual conference where the localization comes together to learn from industry leaders. We've got some amazing speakers lined up. Anna Schlegel, if you guys know who she is, will be delivering the keynote. We're going to share best practices from across the industry and really work together to shape the future of global content. So if you're interested in learning more and registering for our Global Ready Conference, you can use the link in the chat. But Jourik, thank you so much for taking the time to participate in our masterclass here. I think the audience, I really enjoyed the conversation. I think our audience got a lot out of it, and looking forward to seeing you future someday down the road.
Thank you, Bryan. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.